आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Namaskar and welcome to our series of programs on unlocking the Indian economy and putting the economy on the road to economic revival. In this third and final episode, we're going to be looking at unlocking entrepreneurship and looking specifically at the government policy environment so that entrepreneurs can convert this crisis into an opportunity. Also, we'll be looking at the way industry is moving into Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, and also the importance of R&D in institutions. Taking us through the discussion, we have two very eminent guests. Let me introduce you to them. I've done two one-on-one special interviews with each of them. They are Dr. Arvind Birmani is the president of the Forum for Strategic Initiative and the chairman of the Foundation for Economic Growth. He's been a former chief economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance and a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund. Vidisha Ganguly is the chief economist at the industry body CII. CII, as we know, is a key industry body and it tracks every aspect and every sector of the Indian economy very closely. It also works very closely with government on business policy and also lobbies for business to create a better business environment. So let's begin. We know that Einstein had said that in the midst of every crisis lies a great opportunity. So do you see, our entrepreneurial spirit taking up this challenge?
Yes, I work for the Confederation of Indian Industry, which is essentially a group of entrepreneurs who have shown great, have been really contributed a lot to their country, and they are certainly, I believe in entrepreneurship. That without that we cannot have.
But I'm talking about at the current time, looking at this, as this crisis as an opportunity. I mean, the fact that we can create new products, come out with something new, and actually take advantage, in a sense, economic advantage, in a sense, of the situation.
Well, there are real life examples of that. Right after the COVID situation happened, a lot of companies came up with products that are needed in this situation. The pharmaceutical companies or even companies that manufacture sanitizers or masks initially, or even the ventilators. Initially, there was a shortage of ventilators in the country. That's not the case anymore. So a lot of initiatives have been taken in this particular situation.
We used to have this, those of us who were involved in the 91 crisis, balance of payment crisis, we used to say, had this thing, which I didn't know came from Einstein, that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Yes. So do the entrepreneurs have the thing? Yes, I think they do. I think they were thrown off balance for a little while, in, I would say, late 2018, 2019, where there was a feeling of, helplessness and not enough help from the government. But I think that is all over. I think given that the government is on the job, very much so, we've already discussed some of the things they have been doing. I think the big business people are now beginning to get their confidence back. And I'm convinced that they will, they've never let us down. I remember from 91 also when we changed the policy framework and they responded very well. So I'm sure they will respond, yes.
Okay, and we have a target for a $5 trillion economy by 2025. So what do you think? I mean, has that been set back a little bit by COVID? Of course it has, I'm sure it has, but there's a big role for entrepreneurs if we have to look at that opportunity and to rise up again. Do you see us adding, let's say, 50,000 startups by 2024?
Yes, so absolutely the goal of 5 trillion economy has been delayed. But with these reforms, and I expect some more reforms related to GST, direct tax code, and a few others, I'm sure that we will be on track again. Now, where does do startups come in? Self-employment plays a huge role in an Indian economy as against EU or USA, etc. So people who advise us from that side really don't comprehend how important self-employment is. But the self-employment has a huge negative complement in the sense that there's nothing else to do, so people are forced to go into self-employment, which is low productivity and not give them very much income. So in this context, modernizing of self-employment, this entrepreneurship, and I think that this government has really recognized, not only recognized, and put a lot of emphasis on it. It's a tricky thing. A lot of other countries have wasted money on trying to do this. So it's not easy. So when I say others have not done it, that's not so much a criticism because people just didn't know how to do it. But it's absolutely clear that modernization of entrepreneurship, modern startups is going to be key to a self-employment economy, which is high productivity and high income. So that's the key point to remember. So in that context, absolutely, we are too much, Indians have been too much on jobs, permanent jobs, that where do you get it? Government. Okay, a few corporates. Corporates are 8% of the economy, not enough. So this entrepreneurship, self-employment is going to be a key, very key element of India's growth.
Let's take a look at the $5 trillion economy then. I mean, one was feeling that we were very much on course, but this year and perhaps next year too, maybe recovery years. So in this sense, how do you see? There's got to be a big role for entrepreneurs here. What would you think? I mean, do we need to add many more startups? How do you see us moving forward?
First, the $5 trillion goalpost has been shifted back, at least by 2 years, I would think. Because we have, even with the recovery and a fairly strong recovery, we will not come back to the level of the economy which we had in 2019-20 till about 2022. So that's clearly 2 years lost, and it will take time to get back. Entrepreneurship will certainly have a role to get back to that, but it will need support. There are many companies which have suffered huge losses, and they will. We do not want them to also, retrench jobs. So, in order for them to move forward, they would need some support from somewhere, either banks or the government. So, of course, there is scope for new products. We have seen in this situation that e-commerce has come up in a big way. Anything digital is doing well. Food delivery, e-commerce as a whole, and in this festival season, a lot of it will be done by e-commerce. But there are these few segments that are doing extremely well.
Right. So do you see us adding about 50,000 startups by 2024?
Difficult to say, but yes, certainly a good target to keep in mind.
The government has provided assistance for upgrading existing facilities, plant and machinery. Also, they provides various subsidies. So the government has been encouraging also ease of doing business norms to get better. But people have a problem right now because they don't really know what to produce, because they have to have a market. They have to be able to sell. I mean, this is where entrepreneurship at the end of the day is thinking ideas, isn't it?
Yeah. So so this complementarity is very important. One is pure independent entrepreneurship and startups, which are directed at the new economy, right? E-education, e-health, that is something in the social. I think we have a big leg up because I think the developed countries really didn't focus on social entrepreneurship in their earlier development. So we can compete on that angle, that side. There is the digitization of existing items, etc., etc. But the key point which India has often missed in the past is the complementarity between the large corporate sector and the medium small sector. We used to talk about 10, 20 years ago, there were even papers written in the IMF, etc., of the missing middle, So given our labor laws, our small employment policies earlier, which have now been corrected with the labor code, etc., we had a missing middle. Either companies became very large, capital intensive things, or they were very fragmented, small companies. So what this new policy approach will do is it will recreate that missing middle, so that the whole eco-structure can grow together. So smaller entrepreneurs. So this the points you mentioned, I think, what was it, the EODB, the ease of doing business, just helps not only the large sector. Of course it helps the large sector, but it also helps this missing middle and the smaller sectors. So part of EODB it relates directly, like a simple GST or a simple direct tax code, which has nothing to do with companies. The direct tax code, if it's simple, it will help self-employed people of small entrepreneurs.
But what to produce at this time? What to produce? That's
it's basically demand driven. But that will emerge. That's where the linkage comes in. You see, when you cut it off, these people are just looking wildly for what to sell. But if you have an ecosystem which connects, the large companies are very good at looking for markets, for developing markets, and then they order backwards. So the backward linkage, restoring that, is going to produce. Again, it takes time. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow, but over a period of, let's say, 3 to 5 years, you will see that these linkages develop, so that this problem which individual. But there is one more. Yes, you're right to remind me. There are, of course, the new digital platforms, like the government's e-market, what's it called? E-GEM.
GEM.
E-GEM, right? And other market platforms which are rising, where smaller people can go in, and people who have various demands can ask for things. That these two together will be where this demand problem will get sorted out. One is these direct digital platforms, and the second, linkages with large companies, which are very good at marketing.
There are schemes that are available for people to upgrade, to improve their infrastructure. The policy environment is encouraging ease of doing business. And the big question is, people have in mind that, do we have a market? What can we produce at the end of the day? So the situation for the entrepreneur is what to produce. I mean, it's a basic question in economics, really. What to produce at this time?
So one thing that we must remember is that today the market is a global market, and it's not only that you have to produce something new, but you could take over market share from other countries. Some basic goods like textiles, for example, India has lost market share in many categories, and it is so what to produce is not difficult. There are a large number of products that we can produce, and we should go for more of finished products. India can go for apparel much more than what we do currently. In many other products, take jewelry, any accessories, all of these can be designed in India and exported from India. That should be the target for the entrepreneurs, because India can have a much higher market share in these categories.
Okay, since there's been a pandemic, obviously focus has been on diagnostics, on testing and healthcare, and obviously it has got a boost because we've seen testing especially has gone up significantly. We've adapted well to these. But do you see huge business opportunities here for the long term as well? Because people may be changing their lifestyle. They need to see what's wrong with them at a regular basis. People are taking tests to figure out what's wrong with them. Health is an important factor.
Absolutely. Healthcare will come up. Both the government and the private sector need to spend more on healthcare. So India is a market where it's the private sector which people turn to for their health needs. The government is not very hugely present in the health space. Of course, the government needs to step up, but the private sector has traditionally been there in the health space, even not just in the higher segment, but even for the weaker segment. So therefore, this is a huge opportunity as the government also increases its spending on healthcare. This provides a huge opportunity for the private sector as well. And in a range of things, not only hospitals, but things like, as you mentioned, diagnostics, but even things like
vaccines,
pharmaceuticals, vaccines, yes. Across the spectrum, India has huge advantage. We have skills in these areas. one area where we have fairly developed skills, and I think it's a bright future for this industry as a whole, as a broad spectrum.
And specifically about vaccines, I mean, what do you think? Because, there are a lot of concerns, and also there are a lot of regulatory requirements. So, and people are just waiting for a vaccine to get back to normal. And, people are following this space. So at the end of the day, they will look at huge numbers because, you have to vaccinate half the population to get rid of a particular disease. So that's huge potential in a sense, business-wise.
Yes, but I think we have to be a little patient because it is a huge challenge and a huge task to distribute the vaccine even after we have a vaccine with a positive potential. To distribute it across such a huge population, we need to know how to distribute it. You need cold storage across the country to actually distribute the vaccine. And it's not an easy task. So it will, I think, take over a year, even after we have a successful trial, to get the vaccine distributed across the country.
We know that demand obviously creates supply, but we've seen that in the case of the pandemic with diagnostics and healthcare institutions all getting a big boost. But and we have adapted to the needs because we now ramped up on testing. Next thing will be on vaccines. So these are huge business opportunities, isn't it, at this time? But the question is, can these be sustained over a period of time, or are they just for this period of time?
So whenever we have a change, this is a question which comes up: how much of it is permanent? How much of it is temporary? Now, this is anybody's guess, but I think a good starting point is, in most of these things, you can start with the assumption that half is temporary, half is permanent. But I think in the case of health, it is much more actually. It's more than half is going to be permanent, because health is something very personal. It is not some, and once you become aware of it, you're unlikely to forget it. That's one. Second is the education which has happened. People have become aware. Even people like us who fully knew about germs and washing hands, etc. I can tell you myself personally, now I wash my hands much more often, and I realize that if I touch anything and then I touch my nose, a germ is likely to go into my nose also. It's not just a matter of eating, So that education which is occurring is going to be permanent. Every person on the street, a person who works for me in the kitchen or whatever, they've all become aware of these things. So on the health related thing, there's no doubt there's going to be a much heavier component of permanent. The second one is digital. I just mentioned it for information. I think that digitalization is going to be hugely accelerated.
Yes, and taking that digitalization aspect a little further, we know that R&D has been to some extent lacking, but R&D has to be linked also to our institutions so that our institutions can raise their profile. We have IITs, which are great. So, R&D, which can be linked to industry, innovation hubs, creativity, all this. What do you see? I mean, the potential is that we can probably create the next Apple, Google, or Facebook here in India.
So there are two aspects. Let me start with the caution and then give you the positives.
Okay.
The caution is that too often in the past, we've tried to run before we learn to walk. We don't create the base and we say, okay, we are just going to go to the top. It doesn't work. You have to have the whole base. And we've talked about some of the elements of the base, like better education quality, right? We've already mentioned it, that education reforms are trying to do that. So you have to make sure your base is strong. That's the caution. The part which is good and is happening is that the government is focusing on the ecosystem. So for example, the financial stack, the health stack, and there is talk of an education stack, that is creating an environment which has large economies of scale. Individual companies find it difficult, even though now we have a company Geo, which is doing it in part of the system. But the government has rightly focused on creating the environment by creating these stacks. We've discussed many times this Aadhaar, right?
Yes, yes.
That Aadhaar numbering system has created a huge part of the ecosystem which will help develop the rest of the pyramid. So things like that. The focus is on creating the environment with that, because that requires huge investment and has a lot of externalities, what we economists say. Externality means that not the company creating it can't incorporate the profit, so they spend less. But a government doesn't care. The company is the whole country, right? So the government has a role in creating some of these basic things and then getting the private sector in to build the rest of the pyramid. I think we are now beginning to go the right way. Hopefully we will be successful. But part of which is left is reforming our whole R&D system. You know, we have a huge government R&D system. I think that is still awaiting further reform. So that I would say, but I think we are on the right track.
R&D in top institutes of learning, I mean, like IITs and all that, and innovation hubs also, they are adding to our creativity and creating new products. But do you think we have the potential to create the, Apples, Googles, and Facebooks of the world, like the Prime Minister once said in the United States?
We do have the potential, but we don't currently spend on the right things, and our spending on innovation and R&D is abysmally low. So we must focus on it. Both the government and the private sector have to spend more on R&D, and the higher education institutions, they have to step up to the challenge. Today, we do not have much of R&D happening in the higher education institutions, and that is where the talent will come from for the private sector. So the whole reforms in the education space, I think, will be critical in taking forward this agenda.
Right. This is the final question, ma'am. We are in an age where, we require to have minimal human contact. We're living in so-called dangerous environments. And there's the context of artificial intelligence, robotics, again, play a huge role here. And we're already in the industry 4.0, which is basically technology driven. So how would you look at the potential that we have? Because we have some core strengths here. And even in areas of, let's say, defense and all that, where we are looking at minimal human exposure to danger and in dealing with even a pandemic like this.
It's kind of a little difficult in a country like India, which has a very high density of population. So certainly this is a segment where we have our expertise, and we should exploit it. We should get in, collaborate with foreign partners who have expertise in these technologies. And India has all the skills. There are many foreign investors here who are currently in this space and happy to work within the Indian kind of environment in these areas. So we should really expedite the kind of investments that we are having in these areas.
And with that, we conclude our series of programs on unlocking the Indian economy. Hope you've enjoyed our series of programs. We've looked at unlocking demand, unlocking supply, and unlocking entrepreneurship. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Arvind Birmani and Bidisha Ganguly, for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having
Thank you.
talking to
My
you.
pleasure.
And thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.